Okay, you're live. You can begin.
Good evening. This is Lori LePath, Vice Chair of the McDowell Sonoran Preserve Commission, and we're here for a City of Scottsdale special meeting dated Thursday, February 18th. First thing we're going to do is call to order. So first, I'd like to call Commissioner Steve Dodd.
Yes, here.
Commissioner Mark Hackbarth.
Present.
Commissioner Marsha Lips.
Marsha Lips, present.
Thank you. Commissioner Steve Coluccio.
Steve Coluccio, present.
Thank you. Commissioner Tawana Parker.
Tawana Parker, present.
Thank you. Chairman Cynthia Wenstrom. And she is not present today. Thank you. First of all, for public comment, written comment is being accepted for both agendized and non-agendized items and should be submitted electronically no later than 90 minutes before the meeting. These comments will be emailed to the McDowell Sonoran Preserve Commission meetings and posted online prior to the meeting. To submit a written public comment electronically, there's a place you please click here. We did not receive any comments prior to this meeting. So the next item is policy process update, and Croy is going to give that.
Great, thank you very much. This is Croy Ekblaw with the City of Scottsdale. We wanted to provide a quick update on the policy reviews that we've been working on and will be continuing to work on for the next several months, and looking at how we manage the preserve for the next 25 years. And the slide that's up on your screen now reminds you of kind of the 7 major categories that we have: the land acquisition, the preserve operations, maintenance, along with research and education, the wildlife habitat corridor protection, including a wildlife crossing, the wildland fire, invasive plants and restoration projects, trailhead and trail master plans, and the cultural master plan, and then developing a comprehensive funding review and recommendations specific to the council and ultimately the community. This next slide, you may recall from previous discussions about a year ago, is the same elements that I just had a schedule of timing, talked about upcoming meetings, and importantly it's the second page on the right hand side, the attachment, that one of the key objectives of the commission was that we use the purpose of the preserve out of the existing preserve ordinance and the management objectives out of the preserve ordinance as really our guiding hand as we look at these various elements and what are the things that will be important both to the commission and ultimately the community. And no, you don't have to read all these. I do have a couple slides going forward. We've been doing some work in our couple months since meeting in November, and we've been chatting with both the Justin Owen and Jackie with the McDowell Sonoran Conservancy and other some of our working team members. And this next slide goes back to those key 7 categories. And what we're planning to do is come back to you with some possible tweaking, I'll call it, or minor reordering of this. There was some discussion about that the research and education activities might make sense with some of the overall wildlife habitat and other elements, and really looking at our master plans that we have. So land acquisition, we have some on wildland fire, we have the trailhead and trails master plans, we have the cultural master plan, but we also have the ecological resource plan. And that has a lot of relationship to things that may occur under research and under the wildlife habitat. And so as we were looking at structuring this and how to best manage the dialogue and discussions in the upcoming months, we thought that would make sense. So my goal is likely in 2 weeks, or at worst in 4 weeks, we'll bring this back and have an update on these aspects. So we'll do a little bit of revision to this page. The next slide is just reiterating what we just talked about, that the commission really wants the ordinance and the ordinance purpose and the management objectives to be a strategic guidance to this process. And so the next slide just highlights the purpose element. And I'm not going to read all these. I think many of you are very familiar with these. But as you read all of these different items, they speak of habitat and protecting archaeology sites and providing passive recreational opportunities. All of that relates to those 7 items that we are looking at. And so again, we think it's very appropriate. And we'll do a little bit of coordination, maybe of some of our language on those descriptors back to the purpose. And then this next slide shows the 10 management objectives. And again, everything highlighted in here is relating to these elements. So effectively, really all of the management objectives in some form or fashion really do relate to this. So one of our thoughts is that we will relate these elements to existing or proposed master plans, to the ordinance purpose, and we'll specifically call out each element, which of these management objectives are doing that. And part of this is we know you all understand that, but we want to make sure as we start to move this out into a more public fashion, that those that want to get a better understanding of what's being reviewed and examined can have a kind of a nice little cheat sheet that takes them to where in the ordinance or where in a master plan some of these items are being talked about. So we want to just discuss this very briefly with you. If you have any ideas, we'll put it in a format that's pretty easy, I hope pretty easy to understand, and we'll bring that back. And our goal would be to send that out to you ahead of time as well. So you'll have the ability to review it. You can comment about whether it does or doesn't make sense and bring that back to us and have that in a discussion. So this next slide just comes back to that, the strategic overview. The other thing that the commission wanted to assure is that the long-term sustainability of the preserve is the core of why we're looking at these things. So that the preserve is here 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. They may do an update in 25 years on these objectives, and that's perfectly fine. But we wanted to make sure that that was really, again, part of the guiding goal of this. Next steps on this really are that we will be working to develop that outline, and we'll get that to you here in the near term, and that we will then in the months of March, April, and May be scheduling up many of these items. And that 7th item is that funding item. We'll also be bringing you kind of a one-page cheat sheet of how we can assess the financial side of all of these elements and kind of see that in perspective. And so that'll be another thing for you. And that will be kind of our homework over the next several months, is starting to plug in, both options of what we want to achieve, but then what are some of those costs that come with that? And it's not that we have to be perfect right now, because if we're not going to the voters until 2022, get my years right, we don't have to have those numbers nailed down. But we do want to be able to talk to as we go through this, our goal is by May, June, that you guys have preliminary concepts ready to then present to the council sometime this summer. And that the schedule of the council, we don't completely control. We'll have to fit that in. And so whether that's early in the summer, late in the summer, early in the fall, it'll be somewhere in that time frame, we believe. But getting our homework done, so to speak, and being ready to do that is what we're now going to work on coordinating over the next 3-4 months here. So really just, I know you've all seen this before. Wanted to remind you that these are the steps. Happy to take any questions right now. But that was really what we wanted to just refresh your memories and let you know. And we have Commissioner Parker with her hand raised.
Go ahead, Commissioner
Well,
Parker.
Thank you. Hi, Croy. What is the timing of advising the public? I think at an earlier meetings, you mentioned having signage for the public to be aware of what's going on.
Excellent question. Obviously, these meetings will serve, and all the ones we've already had, all the presentations we had in the fall have all been available to. Part of our goal will be, as we develop and maybe slightly tweak these categories, is develop a website basis through the city that will link to past presentations, be it by Tiffany, the Conservancy presentations that were so nicely done. We can actually post those under the specific categories. We've done presentations, Scott's done presentations on the budget items of our maintenance and operational costs. All of that is information that we can add into that, and then anything that we're going forward with, our public posting process. Obviously, one of the things that we are optimistic about, I've been optimistic for a while, is that we'll actually get to have some physical meetings where we can meet face to face and have some type of public interaction as well. Again, we're not going to force that until we're all comfortable that it's the right thing to do. But whether that could happen later this spring or early summer, we'll certainly look to take advantage of those as well, to the extent that's possible to do. So did that answer your question?
Yes,
Paula?
thank you. Yes, thank you, Croy.
You are welcome.
So Croy, I think having this cheat sheet is a great idea. I think people need things to be, especially when we go to the public.
Mhm.
And I think when we start doing the funding, I think when people start getting those numbers, we're definitely going to need really good cheat, comparison sheets and explanations. And maybe if we all run through those a couple times to make sure we understand it fully, then,
And part of the goal with that, I intend to work with some of our financial experts who are very good with spreadsheet formats, to where, and I don't know how interactive we can make the website on some of that, but the goal would be that there'd be an overall spreadsheet that will show you kind of a way to sum up to what the total ask might be. But then if you're interested in where those numbers come from, that there's at least some link that will take you into that. And that would be the goal, is that in a meeting, if the commission's debating whether it should be 25,000 or 50,000 a year, whatever that is, we could, and a decision is made, we could plug that in, or a recommendation, we could plug that in, and then that will update the whole chart. So we'd like to make this as easy as possible. It'll still be complicated, but we'd like to make it as easy that there's not a lot of pain involved in developing that. So we'll look to do that. I believe we can be successful. And as we get this stuff to you before the next meeting, we really are open. This is not, we take no pride of authorship here. If there's a better way of communicating, particularly with the public, in a nice, simple manner that makes it easier to understand, both for you guys and for the public, we're fire away. Well, like I said, we're not going to be sensitive. You can throw a lot of things at me, and it's quite all right. So, any other questions?
Any other questions, anybody? Steve, go ahead. Commissioner Coluccio? You need to unmute.
Sorry about that. Still learning. Or maybe it's a senior moment. Hey, Croy, once again, it's Steve. So you mentioned going to the voters in 2022, potentially. I guess one reason for doing that would be for potential land acquisition purposes. If that's correct, what other things would we need to go to the voters for at that point in time?
Again, very good question. And anytime we're going to ask the voters to approve a tax, we have to ask their authorization. And so some of this concept is not, land is part of it and could be the biggest part of it from a cost standpoint. But any of these things that we're talking about, being able to have a funding source for long-term monitoring of the health of the preserve, or other science and research, education aspects that, and some of these things aren't funded right now. Some of them are funded by the general fund. Some of them, we don't really have project identified costs yet for invasive plant removal and for restoration projects. We've done some of that with some science dollars or with work at trailheads. Commissioner Coluccio, the idea really is we wanted to put on this big spreadsheet, we want to identify what are all the ideas. And then we've got to be realistic politically about what the council and the community would possibly support. And so anytime so all of that rolls up into a potential request. The only time we can go for a vote is in an even numbered year in the fall election. So that would be November of 22. Our next option would be November of 24. And one of the ideas of either 22 or 24 is it puts us in before the expiration of the 1995 to 2025 existing sales tax. And when that expires, the idea would be we might ask for something much smaller and could go to the voters and say, your original tax paid for acquiring the preserve, this next tax might pay for maintaining the preserve and keeping the preserve protected and whole for the next 25 years, so that if there's a bad economic times and the general fund is hit, there's some people worry about, would we sell the preserve or a portion of the preserve or something like that. This is really one of those many strategies to look at. Is there a way of providing an assured funding source for the long-term protection of the preserve? Long answer. Hopefully that covered what you were looking for there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, no further questions. I'm going to pass it to Scott to give us a trails update.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Lapat Velasco and commissioners. I'm going to review a little bit of what we talked about at the meeting last week in relation to the Pima Dynamite Trailhead and the trail connections around there, and set us up for our field trip that we're going to do on Sunday. So you saw this graphic last time. Obviously, the big blue dot there is the Pima Dynamite Trailhead, and we've been evolving this concept for quite some time now, several years, of having numerous trail connections connect directly to or from, of course, based on the direction you're going, to the trailhead itself, so that we can disperse users and provide that wide variety of opportunities. That is our goal. So this is all based on, of course, the phase 3 trail corridor plan. You can see all the different colored corridors that are there. Taking it to the next slide, which is much more detailed. Those corridors have now become actual trails on the ground. The Rawhide Wash Trail, that's the one farthest to the west, has been completed, as well as the Axle Grease Trail here kind of in the middle. And then we've got the extension of the Hawk Nest Trail coming down. This dashed line is a future interpretive trail concept. And then we've also now constructed the Latigo connector. And these trails, as I said, are on the ground today. They are not on the trail map. So we have put up a couple of our red signs that say you're leaving the mapped area. So people are welcome to go and use these trails. There is an old existing road that is kind of at the current south terminus of these trails that we're using to essentially route people back off of them over to the power line, so they can get back here down the power line into the current temporary gravel parking lot. So if you haven't been out there yet to see them, feel free, go out, enjoy them. The conversation today, we also wanted to cover Area K in preparation for our field trip on Sunday. So the next series of slides is going to zoom into that yellow area that you see there. So here we've got Area K, this big central area. You can see on the aerial photo, there's a lot of rocks in that area, a lot of topographic diversity. There has been a history back when this was state land. These blue lines show some of the primary routes that have been through this area. There are others that are in here that are kind of a little less significant than the ones we've mapped in blue, but it does have a long history of access. It's a very scenic area, so it's drawn people to it for a very, very long time. A couple other kind of lay of the land things here. The dashed red, that is the preserve boundary. Adjacent to that is, of course, private land. You can see the homes there in the aerial. That is the edge of true north. So as we proceed with our conceptual planning for this area, we want to be very cognizant of the proximity to the neighborhood. There's also several large washes that show up here. Of course, we've got this very large one that kind of comes out of the preserve onto the private land and then back in. It's kind of a wide sandy wash. And it's a little harder to pick out, but this little thread up here is a really significant wash. It's kind of narrow because it's sort of a deeper wash. It's not so wide and sandy as it is kind of deep and incised. So it's a pretty prominent feature that's out there on the land. This purple area that just showed up on the map, that is sort of the higher, kind of more built up section of the rock pile of Area K. It does have some sensitivities that we want to be aware of. There's another area out north of the wash that is also rather sensitive that we want to be cognizant of. Some of the other opportunities that are here, there is a very beautiful crested saguaro that's located about in that area of the icon. It's very scenic with the boulders around it. The crested saguaros with their rarity always draw attention. People love visiting this spot. The little green oval that just showed up, that is what we call the rock bridge on that old blue line, the blue line of that old trail that's been there forever. The trail actually passes across a kind of a natural giant boulder that's laying across that deep wash. So it's a very interesting feature that people have been drawn to for a very long time. This second green polygon, and you can kind of see the massive blue trails underneath it, is kind of an open rock area that starts to gain a little bit of, it's kind of the mid-level elevation of Area K that has had a lot of activity on it in the past. And then there's an area just out to the north from the more vertical part of the rock pile that has a lot more kind of horizontal rock fins and rock slabs that it doesn't have very well-defined trail routes on it from history, but there is quite a bit of activity that does go on top of those horizontal rock areas. So based on all of those kind of opportunities and constraints, this is the very kind of rough level concept plan that we've developed based on all of those concepts and those ideas. This is what we will talk more about when we go out there on Sunday to actually look at it. But generally what we're thinking is, of course, you can see here the crested saguaro. We know that's going to be a draw for people. So what we want to talk more about and come up with some details on is we know people are going there. How can we let them go there, take pictures of it, see it without getting too close to it, compacting the soil, impacting its root zone, beating down the other vegetation. So we want to think real hard about how we can facilitate that access, but also protect everything as best we can. Regarding the trail that heads out to the north, the concept is to essentially eliminate that piece of trail and replace it with a piece of trail that's a little closer in, just on the south side of the wash, rather than crossing over and being north of the wash. These yellow lines that you see are conceptual trail alignments. Again, this is all concept. Our goal here is to kind of flesh this out and come up with what we will actually do here. But the concept is to potentially route some trails along those rock surfaces where people are using quite a bit of that area already today. How can we formalize it in a managed way so we can provide the access that people want while also protecting as much vegetation and habitat as we can. The binocular icon, you're kind of, again, in that mid elevation. You're not on the very top, but you're not on the bottom. There's a really large boulder that people like to sit on. The view from there is phenomenal. So we know people are going to come here to be near the boulders, to take advantage of that view. So right now, the concept we've developed is, maybe this is the place, at least a place to consider creating that view opportunity for people in a managed way. The red dashed line then is potentially a fence that we may consider putting around the remainder of the rock pile to keep people out of it and to protect those sensitive resources that are in there. So this area K, every topic that as a land manager we need to address pretty much occurs right here in this several acre area, which is why we've been giving it such kind of intense analysis, and I've planned a field trip for the commission to go out and see it firsthand. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Anybody have any questions?
And we, of course, will have the opportunity on Sunday in our field trip to look at this firsthand, walk around it, and talk about it as we are there on site.
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, this is Steve. Hey, Scott. Yeah, that looks like it's going to be pretty cool area out there. I don't really have any questions with regard to that presentation, but I did get out to the new trails, Axle Grease and Hawk Nest on Sunday, and you guys did a really good job on that. They're really, really neat trails. So nice job, well done.
Well, thank you. It's obviously the result of a lot of teamwork with the citizens, with our Phase 3 working group. And then Doug Hansen, our trail builder, did an excellent job laying them out and building them. And sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. We had the blessing of the rain that came, well, it actually kind of came as snow, but if it, was enough to wet the soil very nicely for the construction of those trails. And Doug spent quite a bit of time with his crew compacting those trails with the roller and with the plate compactor. So yeah, they came out really, really great, and glad you've been able to enjoy them.
Great. So I'm gonna, Corey's gonna talk about wildland fire management master plan.
Great. All right. So again, some of you have seen we've been dealing with wildland fire management for quite a number of years. We are continuing to work with our great partners, the Scottsdale Fire Department and staff, and we're going to be coming. This is one of many presentations that we've been doing on these policy items, but we did have a couple things upcoming in the not too distant future, like next week, that we wanted you to be aware about. And so this slide is just highlighting what we did a year ago along Pima Road. The before on the left-hand side is taken from nearly the identical spot that the one on the right is after. And so it's a reduction in fuel load of somewhere in the 70%. It takes out, in this case, you got some of the desert broom in there that is very much a wildland fire hazard for us. And so, these are the things that we're going to be talking about. And this next slide shows you, it's a repeat of the previous one, that shows all those perimeter edges, be it 136th Street or down by the Gateway on Thompson Peak and Bell, or down by Lost Dog and the back entry to Oncala and the 128th Street, and then up north, the stuff in red along Pima Road and Dynamite are some of our most sensitive areas. A lot of that work on Pima got done last year, but the area where the green oval is located is the work that will start. I think they're going to be out for a day next week, and then the following week they'll be out, we think, most of that week. Now they can get called away because these are actually wildland fire crews that in the off season, if we can call it that this year, will come and do this type of work. We get grant money and other things to do this type of work. And this is going to be part of those policy discussions. Do we want to fund some of this ourselves and be able to do this work? So we wanted you to be aware that, yes, we're working very intensely right now. Once a week, we're meeting with our Scottsdale Fire staff and developing these types of documents, and much more detailed. And we'll have a lot of exciting things to share in the upcoming weeks. This next slide shows kind of the next layer within the preserve that we would be doing. And these are some of the power line corridors, dirt roads, and even some of the wide trails we have in the preserve that we would be looking to treat. And the power line corridors are thinned by APS and WAPA, but we're also looking at applying pre-emergent in those areas. And what we're really trying to do is create areas where those fine grasses, those fuels that connect from shrub to shrub and shrub to tree, that we minimize some of that, and not in the entire preserve. That's not really practical, but we are trying to identify, and those power line corridors are 300 feet wide, plus or minus. The areas over on the roads, some of the widening, some of that thinning we've been doing is 50 to 70 feet wide. And then we're looking at applying pre-emergent in some of these areas, not necessarily the entire areas, but to create wider corridors that give us or help protect a 50-foot buffer and reduce those grasses in those areas. So this is part of this multi-layered strategy. The next slide shows that in all of our trailheads, where we have driveways entering, parking lots where cars with hot exhaust pipes might back up. And so we want to make sure we don't have those fine fuels. So again, thinning in those areas and looking at pre-emerging those areas so that the grasses don't come up. And this is, again, coordinating with fire, coordinating with a lot of different resources here. This strategy that will address that is what we're going to. So these are the interior. This is the summary of kind of what we just walked through, but we're also then looking at our adjacent boundaries. And let's go to the next one, Scott. Yeah, this one here. This shows what we've had presentations before on Firewise Communities, and something that is a national program. And our fire department has been working on this many years. The areas, those communities in green are fully active with Firewise. The areas in orange have made submittals and are pending getting approval for Firewise. And then the areas in yellow are kind of in the queue. They're working with the fire department. And we're looking at some resource ideas here. And we have opportunities for volunteers, which could well be the Conservancy. And we're having discussions with the Conservancy and Scottsdale Fire and Preserve staff as to how we can help accelerate and assist with some of this planning and go beyond just what's on this graphic. This is where we're at right now, but there'll be strategies for additional. And so all of these things will be coming back with a more comprehensive presentation, but we wanted to, again, get you alerted to the fact that it's not quite the peak of wildland fire season yet, but it's going to come pretty quickly. We're concerned. And so we're trying to stay ahead of the curve as much as possible. This next slide then highlights that there'll be additional updates. I just talked about additional subdivision and community participation, but we're also working with what other areas adjacent or outside of the preserve. And some of those are in Scottsdale and may include doing other road treatments beyond Pima Road. We've done work in the past on Ranch Gate Road, where it connects from 118th Street to 128th. So we're going to come up with an overall strategy that not only helps the preserve, helps all communities and the protection of natural area open space, because I think the last number I recall is like 14,000 acres of Scottsdale are protected in natural area open space. We have 30,000 protected by the preserve, but there's another 14 that's protected on people's individual properties or in subdivisions. And those are, of course, at risk of wildland fire, just as the preserve. So coordinating with that. Coordinating with the Tonto National Forest, the Maricopa County, both county general and the streets, county regional park next to us, Fountain Hills, other adjoining communities, all things that we're working with, and we have dedicated resources in Scottsdale Fire to work on this. So these are all things that we are looking at having additional presentations to you on, updates in the upcoming weeks and months ahead. And this will really never go away. You'll always have presentations on status of wildland fire. We'll always be asking for assistance and things of that nature. But that's where we're at today. Awareness that next week there'll be some more work starting, and we'll keep you updated on their progress. And there'll be some other areas we intend to get to yet this, I'll say, spring, before we or as we enter into the full wildlands fire season. So that's my presentation. Again, happy to take any questions that the group might have.
Any questions, commissioners? Okay, if not, I'm gonna pass it to Scott.
All right, item 7, this is going to be a very brief staff report since we covered it at the last meeting and we'll cover it in 2 weeks in the March meeting. We didn't have anything for this time, so.
Okay. Okay, upcoming meeting dates.
Upcoming meeting dates, Scott sent out today, I think we can go to the next slide, the tour on Sunday. And Scott sent an email to those of you that are going to be able to attend. You can meet in the parking lot or at that Crested Saguaro. You meet us in the parking lot at 10 o'clock and we'll immediately start hiking out to that Crested Saguaro. But if somebody wanted to get out early and take a hike or a bike ride before 10, you're welcome to meet us at the Crested Saguaro at 10:15 or plus or minus a minute or two, and we'll be there. Now, and we'll go over this at that time. This is not a public meeting. This is not a meeting in the sense of you making decisions. You're welcome to ask us questions, but you are not to really speak or come to conclusions out there. We can then reschedule the Area K for the March 4th meeting. And if there's an actionable item, or if you'd like to have a discussion, and we share that. So that's just, we do this with our tours. You're welcome to ask us questions, but we're not here to get into a policy debate or discussion, but we're going to show you things in the field. You can see them, ask what does this mean? But if it needs to get into kind of what I'll call a complex discussion and asking for other commissioner ideas or input, that's what we need to save for the public meeting. So that's the process that we'll have there. And then our next meeting is March 4th. So 2 weeks from tonight, we will have Arizona Game and Fish presenting on the large mammal updates and a couple other items, I think. And that's what, our 8th year in a row that we'll have done that. I don't know if that's 7th or 8th.
7 or 8.
And so that'll be there, and we'll have a couple other items on the agenda. So that's our, and we do have on here a tour possibly in the spring, and that may have something to do, if interest, in land acquisition. We try and do it well before it gets really hot, maybe, or maybe we go out early, depending on what the weather's doing to us. But that would probably be more the April to early May timeframe that we might do that, if we think there's a valid purpose for that. So with that, any questions?
Any questions? Any comments?
Commissioner
Commissioner
Hackbarth?
Hackbarth?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if the chair would request the city staff to invite Maricopa County Flood Control District to talk about their monitoring stations that they have in the preserve. I'd be very curious to see what kind of trends they have.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've, since this isn't agendized, I know we can't go into detail, but we do have a relationship with county flood control, and we have partnered together on the rain gauges that are out there in the preserve and near. Some of them are not in, but very close to the preserve. But yeah, we can absolutely reach out to them and invite them to present. Is there anything in particular that you're curious about, or just in general?
Kind of the past, what they've been learning in the past and how it looks today, if there's any trends that they see.
Okay.
And that's been an evolving program. Some of those stations are pretty new, relatively speaking, but we can outreach to them and see what they think they might have And I don't know obviously their availability and how quickly we can get to that, but we can certainly explore that and get back to you. I know we use their information, particularly when we get weather reports that major storms are coming, and we track, the rainfall and snow amounts or whatever it might be out there. So we do find them useful, and we can update you on that.
Any other questions or comments? If not, would someone like to motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Marcia. Someone like to second?
Second, this is Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. do I need to go through-
You need
Yeah,
a
yeah, right.
roll call vote.
Okay, we're going to roll call for adjournment. Okay, Commissioner Steve Dodd,
Mr. Dodd votes yes.
Commissioner Mark Hackbarth.
Mark votes yes.
Great. Commissioner Marsha Lips,
Commissioner Lips votes yes.
Commissioner Steve Caluccia,
Commissioner Steve votes yes.
Commissioner Tawana Parker.
Parker votes yes.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.